Well, Red Deer, how are we? This is another edition of After Council Interview with Mayor Ken. It's always a great thrill to be with you. Today, we are at the Museum and Art Gallery, a place I hope, Red Deer, I hope that you've visited frequently. And if you haven't, please come down and see it. It's just a marvelous, fantastic look at the heritage that we enjoy, at the memories of the contributions of the folks that have gone before us, and how this city was built and how its character was etched. This morning, I'm joined by the one and only Patrick Mitzwing, who I'm honored to call a friend in our community. And ladies and gentlemen, you probably didn't know this because Patrick wouldn't wear it on his, on his clothes or on his shoulders or whatever the case may be. But we have a world champion, not a provincial champion, not a national champion, a world champion in men's fancy dance with us this morning. He just came back from the Super Bowl. He didn't get me any autographs, but still, that's okay. That's all right. But what a thrill, Patrick, to be with you this morning. It's just tremendous. So let's get started.
For sure. Super Bowl was fun, but hanging with you, it's a little bit funnier here. So let's get this going.
Well, I can dodge a blitz. I will say that you can't be in politics, Patrick, if you can't dodge a blitz and that kind of thing. So anyway, all good.
Awesome. So Monday you had a council meeting, right? All you guys met up, and so what I heard is council approved reserve bids for properties being offered for sale at the 2023 tax sale auction.
Yes.
So Mayor, could you maybe talk about this process and when a public auction of property would come into play in a tax process?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Patrick. We have 14 properties now that are on the reserve list, if you will, as a result of tax bids. So typically what would happen, and it's a bit of an unfortunate story, when you think about how the bids came about. So typically, if you miss property taxes for 3 consecutive years, so in other words, you haven't paid your property taxes for 3 years, what the city will do is they'll file what's called a tax lien against the property. That enables the city then to go forward with a legislative process called a public sale or public auction. So in order to preserve the rights of the property owner, meaning do they get a fair price for their property if it goes that far, in order to preserve that and also to preserve the integrity of the process, we'll get an appraiser to come in, appraise the property, and then the city will set a reserve bid at the value of that appraisal. So that ensures that a property owner then isn't out any value from the process. So typically what will happen, we set these bids yesterday. As I said, there were 14 properties ranging in value, but we set the reserve bids. And now over the next 12 months, because it is a 4-year process, so it's an additional year on top of the 3, it's a 4-year process. Now over this year, our folks in taxation and assessment will continue to work with the property owner, see if we can find a settlement somewhere, see if this would take care of itself in what I would call a normal way. So it's rare that properties go to public auction. I was first elected in 2013, so I've been around, say, for 10 years. It's either one is all I've heard of or possibly none, because by the time it gets to this point, people come back to the table and get the matter settled.
Very interesting. So also yesterday, the council approved a new collaboration approach to emergency management, right? So can you talk about what this formal partnership would enhance for our region when it comes to emergency management? And what is the difference between this and a mutual agreement?
Yeah, another great question. We're seeing more and more frequent, natural disasters, floods, fires, wind, tornadoes, unfortunately, those kinds of things. they're affecting neighboring municipalities that often don't have the resources that a city would have. For example, the extent of manpower, for example, or equipment would be typical, and so forth. Our fleet, for example, our fleet of trucks and so on is obviously greater than a neighboring municipality like Bowden, for example. So this agreement that we struck. It's an 8-member agreement. I brought the list just to make sure I get everybody on that. But it's an 8-member agreement. And what it enables us to do is, rather than compete for resources, because typically, God forbid, we'd all be hit with a flood at the same time. So I'll just use sandbags as an example. So rather than Bowden trying to scramble for sandbags or Innisfail trying to scramble for sandbags and so on, this agreement brings us all together in one space. And so we can share resources, share thinking, share strategy, share advocacy, those kinds of things. So I think it's a major step forward as it relates to all of us being able to handle disasters. Typically, when disasters strike smaller communities, people tend to head into the cities for shelter and so forth, and all those. So we're able to think in a group setting now rather than individually. A mutual aid agreement is a little bit different. It isn't governed by the emergency measures or emergency management procedure. So, for example, if there's again, God forbid, a fire in the county, and it requires a high ladder, for example, or a specialized piece of equipment, the mutual aid agreement is there that we can get that equipment into the county, get it into Bowden, get it into Innisfail, get it into Delburn, those kinds of things. So that's more of a one-off. Mutual aid is more of a one-off, whereas emergency management is, okay, what are we dealing with? How long is it going to last? And what do we need to do to work together?
Love it. Glad to see that. We're getting prepared for anything that could happen,
We are.
right? So, so what municipalities or groups are around the table for this emergency collaboration partnership?
Well, Patrick, glad you asked, because I brought the list. And,
Nice.
Folks, the old mayor doesn't like to go into paperwork when he doesn't have to. But, these partners are so important to us that I just didn't want to miss anybody this morning. So
Definitely.
Here we have it. Some great, we love our neighbors. So we have Red Deer County, obviously, Delburn, Innisfail, Sylvan Lake, Bowden, Elnora, and Penhold. So, and of course ourselves. So there's eight members there, all great municipalities. And, it's one of those things, Patrick, that you prepare for, you hope you'll never have to use. But now we have it.
So. And it's good just to cover all angles. And, we're all around here, Central Alberta. So let's get into, the land use bylaw. And, just an update on the land use bylaw review project. That was presented by council yesterday, right? So what are the key changes that are being considered for the new land use bylaw?
Well, it's a really broad-based review that we're doing of the land use bylaw. The land use bylaw, one of the planners said yesterday, in fact, I think it was Manager Stewart, that said the land use bylaw is the Bible of planners, at City Hall. So everything to do with neighborhood design, zoning, all those things are captured in a land use bylaw. If you're like me, I'm kind of old school, so the paper-based land use bylaw would be probably somewhere around 5 inches deep, and so by so, weighing about 5 pounds or so, and so on. But the key themes, you talked about key changes in it yesterday, and administration came to us and said, are we on track with this project? Is it going in the direction that council wants to see? So the two main themes are reduction of red tape, which is critical for the development community, or critical for you and I if we're going to, for example, construct a deck on our home, or do a kitchen renovation, or whatever. You need a development permit for those kinds of things. So reduction of red tape is absolutely critical. And then enhance the customer experience. So in other words, fewer hoops to go through, more ways to get things done, quicker ways to get things done, this kind of thing. So it's a very comprehensive review. It'll come back to council, I'm going to say November-ish, maybe October, somewhere in there. Look for a bit more of a consolidated approach to some neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So in other words, you just don't get, for example, Eastview and Morris Row and Clearview as distinct neighborhoods, but sort of a consolidation of common neighborhoods, that kind of thing. Look for that. I would say look for a pretty dramatic reduction in red tape.
Yeah.
It's a curious thing about the land use bylaw. Every time there is an application to adjust it, in other words, somebody wants a new zoning or whatever, there'll be people for and against. Yes, I think it's a good idea. No, I don't think it's a good idea. So it'll be interesting when that comes back to council, because there will be a public hearing around it. Any change to the land use bylaw requires the public. So we're actually out now consulting, and we have done a tremendous amount of consulting in the business community and so on, but we're going to go deeper now into the community. So I'm excited. I think the end result will be a far more efficient land use bylaw and less appeals, which means less time for people, less strain on our planners, less strain on administration, and less strain on council in trying to get things done. So it's a good road we're on.
Love it. Yeah. And I guess you kind of touched on it though, but I was just wondering where the review was at, but the timeline was it? You said October, November, right?
Yeah, I would say year end 2023 for sure. That's what our administration is shooting for. And it is a massive project. I think there were 6 or 7 planners in the room yesterday ready to answer questions on it. And we haven't really undertaken a review. I'm going to say 2005, somewhere around there, so 18 years ago, and it could be argued it was even before that, but maybe even the mid 90s kind of thing. So this is a long time. There's been additions. You might remember a few years ago, Capstone came on, and of course that sparked a new chapter, if you will, literally in the land use bylaw. And then we did work around dynamic signs, for example. All those things are part of the land use bylaw. You want to put a neon sign or a flashing sign, dynamic sign. All those things are covered under land use. So, it's pretty. It's comprehensive.
Comprehensive, but
I'm glad I'm not a planner,
right? Exactly.
I'm glad I'm not a planner. I gotta say.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into the revenue and assessment. All the stuff that you guys talked about there.
Yes.
So, this report covered changes to revenue and assessment services fees and charges to reflect market rates.
Right.
So, and to add clarification and transparency, are these changes reflective in comparison to other municipalities?
Well, that's a tremendous question, and they certainly are. When we went through our budget deliberation back in December, we asked administration to bring us a snapshot of these 7 or 8 areas. In fact, my memory serves me right, I believe there were 6 in that particular table that we looked at. So our administration was able to say, what is the market average? So, for example, you throw in Calgary, Edmonton, Grand Prairie, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Airdrie, probably, but certainly those other cities on that list. And typically, how are they recovering cost? Because the theme around this is cost recovery. It's not it's not sort of another way to reach in and take $10 from your wallet. It's a fairness to everyone by saying if the city needs to go and look up data or provide you a tax certificate or whatever that looks like, what is the cost of us having to do that? So the fees are designed to cover costs, and that's the real principle. In many cases, we found ourselves still under the market average. So we're very, very competitively placed there.
Yeah. So I guess just talking about fees, when was the last time fees have been reviewed or increased?
That is a great question. Our assessment folks told us yesterday it was 2005, so about 18 years ago. So you can imagine the impacts of inflation and so on, partly offset by technology. We don't have these massive file cabinets from my day, bring in more file cabinets, it's kind of funny. I look around sometimes. The modern office, Patrick, is a little too modern for me sometimes, because the first thing I look for is where are the file cabinets?
Right.
Where are the file cabinets? the Rolodexes. You're too young to remember that name. The Rolodexes, all those things. So technology has helped, but at some point in time, that whole fairness issue comes in terms of if you're looking for extra services from the city, then you shouldn't be subsidized by the tax base itself. You should be paying for those individually. So typically, for example, tax notices and tax records and so on are typically requested by the financial institutions, law firms, those kinds of things. So we need to make sure when we're fulfilling those kinds of requests that we're covering costs and being fair to the whole tax base.
Yeah, definitely. So awesome to spend time with you. With your meeting, not everyone could be there. So is there anything else that happened in that meeting that you want to tell our viewers today?
Well, there's no end to things you can talk about, Patrick, and I always enjoy, my time with Shaw. It's fantastic. But, a couple of things. I spoke yesterday. We have a little section before we begin council meeting. We call it points of interest, and I happened to, knowing the interview was today, didn't include an event that I was at on the weekend, and this was at Sunday. So I'm just talking to the folks and good folks in our Shaw audience this morning. So I went over to St. Joseph's High School on Sunday, Carolyn and I, and we were guests of a competition called the Provincial Robotics Championship. Yeah. So there's 33 teams. It was amazing. 33 teams from Alberta, high schools, grade 10s, 11s, and 12s competing in a robotics competition. Each team brings a robot. And the two winners from that competition will go to the World Championships in Texas. Amazing. In April. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we had a chance to meet these kids and so on. And I'll tell you, Shaw folks, if you're like me, sometimes you get cynical in your old age. I'll say that. You get a little cynical. You kind of think, where are we going? And, these kids, oh my God, we can't leave the world with these kids. They don't know what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have the same, sort of character that we had, which is not true. So after, having an opportunity to talk with these kids and mingle with them, the enthusiasm, the optimism, the creativity, the teamwork, their devotion to getting things done and looking forward to their own futures. Because God knows, Patrick, I don't have to tell you, our world can be a bleak place when you look at it from that perspective. So it gave me a great sense of optimism. And I knew I was going to be on Shaw this morning, so I didn't mention it yesterday. I would have if I wasn't on Shaw. But I just wanted our Shaw viewers to know, our future is in good hands. There are a lot of great kids out there.
Just you explaining that makes I missed out on a good event. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I think you would have been amazed. These kids have to design a robot that fits into an 18-inch cube. Yeah. Okay, so you have your 18-inch cube. So you take your robot out. And there's no limit, though, to how the arms and all that kind of thing can do its thing. So pretty amazing. Gave me a lot of hope about the future. So
okay, sweet. Before we close out and you give these folks a good send-off, speaking of events, our 3rd annual International Powwow in October. Wow. Will we be seeing you there again this year?
Patrick, I'll tell you right now, unless the good Lord reaches down and says, hey, Kent, I need you up here, or whatever that looks like, I will be there. Thank you for bringing up the powwow and what a magnet it's become for us. To be able to get in and to celebrate and to really thrive on Indigenous culture and your stories and all the great things. So I'll be there. It's a highlight for me. I remember last year's event. I came out of there. My God, there were wings on my ankles. I felt so good and so welcomed. Let's give her in October, Patrick.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you for the update with the council meeting. And I don't know if you want to send our viewers off today.
Well, I always do, in that sense. And, I'll say once again, what a fantastic leader we have in our community with Patrick and his wife. They're just simply amazing. It's been great this morning. If I could leave you with that message this morning, I will say, viewers, coming across the parking lot at the museum here this morning, I saw some deer tracks. I thought to myself, wow. First of all, a little distressed that I saw deer tracks, which means there's still snow on the ground. Not so good. But it reminded me of what an environment we live in here in Red Deer. You know, we're just not far from Piper Creek and so on, just over here and so on. So, folks, yes, it's getting to be a little bit of a long ride, wintertime. But if you can get outside and get on our trails and enjoy the outdoors, please do so. Takes the sting out of it. And until next time, Red Deer, this is Mary Ken. We're looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Yet